everyone, today we're taking a look at the AxisFlying C35. So the prop size is 3.5 inch, and this is the RunCam Link, or you might remember them as the Visto or the DJI version. So it's got the Nebula Pro camera, it looks like, on here, but I don't know how long that will be available. The flight controller down there is the F722, and that is a 40 amp ESC, of course, that has our OSD chip on there as well. The motors listed on the website are the AF204s, and you can see they're printed on the motor is, I think, C224, and they're 3300 kV. This is the 4S version. The props are actually the Gemfan D90 tri-bladed props. Got a soft mounted plate up here for your external HD camera, as well as a little capture for any wires you might need. But at 3.5 inch, you could definitely fly this with a full-sized, battery-contained external HD camera of your own choosing. Mine is the bind and fly version, so I just stuck my ELRS receiver out here on an arm, but that's technically the spot where it should go for long-term use. They tout these 70-75 standoffs as being more durable than other standoffs used, so that's a feature I thought I should call out. Also, you can see right down there, we do have access to our USB port, as well as our bind button back there on the Vista. Got a rubberized and texturized battery mat with what feels like a quality battery strap. XT60 on our battery connection. And as you can see here on the back, we have several different options that we can purchase this as far as our control link. You can get TBS, you can get FrSky if you want to. But of course, I got the bind and fly version. I put my receiver, again, just out here on an arm. Kind of silly, I know, but makes it really easy. Got a foam padding here on the bottom to temper any of our really hard landings, so that should help us save from too many hard bonks. Right down in here, they use some of my favorite motor wire tape to secure our motor wires inside the stack so they won't get into our prop line. The prop protection is secured not only from the bottom, as you can see here from these screws, but you also will notice screws out here where it's secured down from the top. Motor post to motor post, I am getting about 152 millimeters. The carbon fiber frame thickness is 3.5 millimeters thick. And you can also see there we have different options for mounting if you were to want to build this frame out. We've got 25 by 25 as well as 20 by 20. It weighs just about 301 grams. I flew it with the FlyWoo Naked GoPro 9. So of course, I have to add that, as well as my ability to get power to it, and the screw to mount it. That makes it weigh 357.5 grams or thereabouts. In the slower flight, I use this Infinity 4S 1300 milliamp pack. My little micro scale doesn't go up that high, but the weight of the battery is about 159 grams, so I have to do a touch of math. In the faster flight, I use this 850 milliamp 4S battery, which I use the smaller battery for less weight so I can fly more aggressively, but still get some relatively decent flight time. And that battery weighs just under 99 grams. An extra bottom foam pad, an extra battery strap, 2 Allen keys, 4 zip ties, an extra rubberized battery mat. If I called this the battery mat, it's actually the bottom mat is more appropriate. And 2 extra wire connectors for different receiver types. Of course, you can buy it with a receiver included, but you'll probably get these anyways. All right, this is the cruising or CineWhooping type of flight. Notice the breeze that we've got up there. Of course, we are protected, but if you look at the top of the screen, you'll see the trees waving. You can probably also hear it on my flight audio camera. The audio is not from the GoPro 9. You can actually hear the fan on the back of that GoPro 9. Once you get going, you'll kind of not hear it if you're using one of those. But initially, before the props are spinning on the quad, you'll hear that fan whirring. Again, this was on my Infinity 4S 1300 milliamp, one of the larger batteries I have. If you're familiar with the channel, I do mainly micros 3 inches and below in prop size. I do have a smattering of larger 4S batteries, but this is probably the highest quality battery that I have in appropriate size for this type of quad. But it is fairly old. I would say it's at least 4 years old. So your flight times may be far greater than this, depending upon your battery quality and care. This flight at this style, carrying this camera, is going to come in at 7 minutes and 31 seconds in this breeze. I guess I should mention that as well. And one of the reasons why you want to see this sort of stuff is just to kind of look at to see how smooth the footage is. I do have, I think it's called Hyperflow, enabled on the GoPro, so that's going to minimize some of the dramatic movements that we might see, and it'll smooth things out just a touch, as typically GoPro Hyperflow does. But this should give you a good sample in wind, in my environment, and the type of video footage that it can possibly get. After this flight, we won't roll all of this flight, but after this flight, I'll fly it more aggressively, which is one of the stranger things I think I do on the channel, as I fly these CineWhoops more aggressively, more my typical style. And I do that for a couple of different reasons. One is maybe you want to fly something like this. Maybe you just want something that offers prop protection. You're not looking at it as a traditional CineWhoop of slow cruising. Maybe you'll start out slow cruising and then you'll work into more aggressive flight, doing maybe tricks of some sorts, and I'll display what I can in this particular video. Or you just want to fly faster, or you just do any sort of different sort of flight. Just because it's positioned in the market as a particular kind of quad doesn't mean you have to fly it like we traditionally think those type of quads need to be flown. And that's one of the reasons why I do that. The other reason is I just enjoy flying a little bit more aggressively. That's just kind of my thing. And then I guess the third reason would be that I tend to have some mistakes and crashes. So that tests the durability a little bit. In this particular case, my crashes were all pretty minor, so I'm not going to produce a crash reel on that. It was mainly me just tumbling in the grass. You may have noticed as we went through the quick specs that I had quite a few grass stains on the prop guards, and that was because, you know, I crashed in the grass. So they're not dramatic crashes. I didn't crash into the house or the pole or any of the stonework around the cabana or anything like that. I would just get too low as I was probably coming around a tree. Maybe I was doing a snap flipper roll, and then the ground was closer than I expected, so then I ended up hitting the ground. Or I just, you know, maybe there was a few times, there was at least once, maybe even twice, where I just ran the battery so low that I just didn't have the juice to get home, and I ended up tumbling in the grass because the battery voltage was so low. Yeah, I know, not good for our batteries. I shouldn't do that. But whenever I'm flying the Link Vista DJI system and it doesn't have the flashing low voltage warning, I always have troubles when I'm flying more aggressively of keeping a good eye on my battery voltage. So that's my fault. That's something I'm still working on correcting. But oftentimes I just get wrapped up into the flying that I'm doing and having the fun, and I don't notice that my voltage has gotten low and I need to get home. This also has a buzzer, which we don't see much anymore, and you'll get to hear that buzzer in my more aggressive flight, so you'll get an idea of how loud it emits its sound. It is a full-sized buzzer as far as our quads go, and it does have a printed mount that the buzzer seats into, so nice and secure. And that's one of the things I think AxisFlying has kind of become known for, is a little bit of a premium brand, and have thought through more different little details within a quad, like a buzzer and a housing for the buzzer. You know, when we first started having buzzers, at least in the micro arena, they were oftentimes just double-sided sticky tape to something inside the quad, whereas now we've got all this 3D printing that we can do, and they've designed a 3D print for that buzzer. Other details would be like the aluminum standoffs, the 70-75 standoffs that are more durable, a harder material which should keep the quad in good running shape. You shouldn't loosen up too much, provided your crashes aren't terribly dramatic, and your footage should stay relatively consistent. And then we've got the dampening on the HD camera mount, as well as the screws that go through it. It used to be years ago when you had these little rubber grommets that we didn't put the bolts through them, and what we would do is put like dental floss or some sort of string through there and have it loose, so that when we did crash, that camera mount and everything just didn't go flying. Of course, it's become much more standard, one of those lessons learned as time has gone by. Alright, we've watched several minutes of the slow flying in the wind, and I hope that provides the usefulness that you need in order to tell what sort of footage in the wind that it can get. Of course, this is, again, the GoPro Hero 9 naked from FlyWhoop. If you are interested in that particular camera, I have reviewed it, as well as there'll be a link in the video description to FlyWhoop's website, or wherever you can find that particular camera, or you can just Google it, FlyWhoop GoPro or GP9 naked. Let's move on to the more aggressive flight. Okay, this is a different day, so the wind isn't nearly as brisk as it was, and this is also our goggle view, or our DVR from our goggle. You can see by my background, I'm using my Radio Master Zorro, as well as the original black DJI goggles, and goggles are recording this DVR. And as I hit the throttle from time to time, you will hear the buzzer. I probably should have adjusted the low voltage warning on this, at least for the buzzer side of things, to a little bit of a lower voltage, because I am flying a smaller battery. So when I do go to 100% throttle, it does get down to like 349, and then the buzzer would go off for a little bit, and then as soon as I'd get off the throttle, it would stop. So we kind of have to deal with that for a while. But this is me cranking up the camera angle and going a little bit faster, at least as fast as I can with this quad in my space with my skills. This also gives you an idea about the camera view, not only the quality of the image, but from time to time we have seen in particular quads where maybe the FPV camera has got some movement to it, some shutter, some shimmy, and We need to see that as well, just not the HD footage. And again, if you're going to fly this in this sort of manner, maybe you're looking for something that's a little bit more safer, offer some prop protection, and you're not going to be doing a lot of harm to others or other property, and you like this sort of form factor, not just because you want to take HD footage, but just because you want to have fun flying, then this gives you a sample of that. This particular flight is only going to be 2 minutes and 48 seconds. Again, that is on that gold line, the AU line, 850 milliamp 4S battery. That battery too is a little bit aged. I would say it's at least 2 years, if not 3 years old. It was about the time the AU line kind of launched its particular brand of batteries, so I've been using that somewhat consistently. So you may find that your flight time in this sort of flight style with that same battery might be different if the battery is in better condition or just has less flights on it. This type of quad usually is pretty noisy. There's something about the prop protection that just the airflow around the props, I think they tend to be more noisy than the unprop protected counterparts. So that's something that you do have to cope with, is that if you have someone that might be not crazy about the sound that these sort of things emit, then these are going to be kind of difficult to get one that's very silent. Of course, 5-inchers I think are still more noisy, but I'm just speculating there a bit because I haven't flown very many 5-inchers. Again, I'm a micro guy, generally speaking. 3.5-inch props. I do a dabbling of 3.5. I do even a smaller amount of 4-inch props, and by almost mistake, I've done a couple of 5-inchers. Most recently here, was sent a 5-incher by Emax. Okay, we can hear a beeper, and we're coming in here for our landing. It won't be necessarily the most smooth landing, but our voltage is going to be okay. That was a bit rough. 3.6 volts. I'm going to try to show you, see this little bit right down in here? That is the housing for the buzzer, and the black part sticking out in front is the buzzer itself. So nicely mounted down there. We don't have to worry about it flopping around. And you can even tell right down here, if you can see that, if I've got enough light, they took some of that motor wire tape and they taped up the wires that come here towards the back. Again, a small detail. AxisFlying tends to cover these things. Further, we can go and look here at our screws. They're using nylon lock nut screws on our VTX up, or not, excuse me, our all-in-one up here, and it also looks like we've got some rubber grommets above and below for soft mounting. Again, not something that all companies always do, but something I thought was pretty interesting and should always be called out. The solder balls on the soldering from the motor wires, you can see those. They look pretty shiny and sharp, so proper soldering there. We mentioned in the video, the flight video, how we have this gimbal up here, and we're now putting screws or bolts all the way through them. This isn't something necessarily exceptional because we're doing that a lot these days, but when we first started out with these kind of dampened platforms, we didn't have anything through there because I think the thought was that that limits our mobility, and therefore, because quads flew so poorly back then, we wanted this thing kind of free floating, and therefore if you crash this top part, because only the grommet was holding it in place, no bolt again, it would just go flying, so you had to go hope and find your external camera, which would be the Xiaomi Yi, I think is what we were using at the time. You know, it was a $50. Again, we're talking 5 years ago. But wanted to draw your attention. 3 points of mount on that camera, not just two. So you've got all three all the way around. And we've got some nice TPU print. You can see if I press that down how the print actually goes through the hole. And we've got the grommet through the hole as well. We've got a nylon lock nut on the bottom. And then our screw head on the top. They do use larger screws to mount the standoffs to the prop protection than they do for like motors, typical motor mounting screws versus the larger screws up here. I called it out previously, but if you happen to mention it, this is where they're designed to put your receiver. Whereas I just stuck mine out on the arm because it was nice and convenient. I did use a wiring harness of my own though, because the wiring harness they included well, I had this already soldered to the receiver, so I went ahead and just used it again. And then we have extra mounts for other sort of protocols that you can find the different options, TBS, Crossfire, whatnot that you can try on here. I think you could probably also get this with just being able to use the DJI black controller, the square black controller. And because my faster flight was the final flight, I'll give you a little profile shot of my camera angle that I was using. No, during that flight, there was no external HD camera. This was just this camera. I wasn't carrying any additional weight. and I was flying with this smaller, lighter battery. But if you have a bigger space, you could definitely, use the same battery it was for the slower flight to get more flight time. I just use a smaller battery because I'm in a tighter space. If you have a larger space where you can make wider turns, or you just have more space to work, a bigger battery is going to be fine because it is a 3.5-inch prop. And I also mentioned it, but my grass stains from just little tumbles in the grass to where I either didn't have enough voltage to make it home, or I just got too low when I was trying to do something fun and I ended up taking a tumble in the grass. But everything's held up real well. I was pretty pleased with the flight experience, especially with the smooth, slow flying in the wind. As time has gone by, our prop protection on these CineWhoops has gotten dramatically smaller. I should probably measure that. So on my calipers, it looks like the prop protection height is about 9.5 millimeters. Whereas it used to be back in the day like an inch or an inch and a half, those big flying boxes that we used to use. I think AxisFlying has got a reputation of building a premium or quality product. Generally, even their modules are some of the more expensive and feature-rich modules on the market. So if you're interested in a quad like this, I will go ahead and link it down in the video description. I did see that Pyrodrome was not only carrying the bind and flies, but it was also carrying the frames in case you want to build up your own. Many people like to do that. It does look like, depending upon the options, that the cost is going to range from anywhere from like $285 to $420. So that's on the bind and fly side of things. 285 to actually 449. Sorry, I just looked just now. So if you get the bind and fly, depending upon which one, 4S, 6S, analog, digital, what have you, what receiver options you go with, it'll range between 285.90 and 449.90. So they're just coming into that next dollar marker. Again, I will link them where they're available down in the video description. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the comments section below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.